Okay, so today's daf is Tadihei. We are 16 lines from the top at the two dots. Ibayalo, they asked a question. Rabbi Yosei le'esoro latir. It said in the Mishnah that there was a machloket. What happens if you're sitting in your house on Shabbat? Your house was a private domain, but all of a sudden there was a huge tornado or something like that. Now two of the walls are torn out, and all you have is two walls. In other words, your house is no longer enclosed. It's no longer a Reshut HaYachid. So Rabbi Yehuda said, even though next week this would not be a Reshut HaYachid anymore, because it's destroyed, the walls are destroyed, there's no enclosure. But for this Shabbat, since you started the Shabbat that this was a house, it was a Reshut HaYachid, it was a private domain, so that status persists for the rest of this Shabbat. Next Shabbat, by next Shabbat you have to have it fixed. However, Rabbi Yosei said, if it's no good for this Shabbat, if it's no good for next Shabbat, it's no good for this Shabbat. In other words, if next Shabbat it's going to have to be repaired by next Shabbat, then it's also no good right now. So the Gemara asks, what did Rabbi Yosei mean? Le'esor o latir. Is he being more stringent or more lenient? In other words, is he saying, just like next week it needs to be fixed, therefore this week it's no good? Or is he saying, just like now it's okay, it doesn't have to be fixed next week? Right? Which one is he saying? So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Shesha says, Le'esor. He was prohibiting. V'chen Amar Rabbi Yochanan Le'esor. And so did Rabbi Yochanan say he was prohibiting. Tanya Nami Achi. And similarly we learned in a Braita, Amar Rabbi Yosei, Kishem she'asurin latid lavo, kach asurin le'oto Shabbat. Just like it is prohibited in the future, it's prohibited now. In other words, the logic is that when it comes to, for example, Eruvei Chatzerot, or some of these Eruvin that are symbolic. So symbolic Eruvin take effect at Ben HaShemashot, they take effect when the sun goes down, and that status persists for the entire Shabbat, no matter what happens. Okay? A window gets blocked between two courtyards, the food that was set for the Eruv gets eaten, it doesn't matter because it's symbolic, you set it for that Shabbat. But Mechitzot, when it comes to walls, that's Rabbi Yosei is saying, it's a physical reality. You don't say, well, since at the beginning of Shabbat this was enclosed, it's enclosed the whole Shabbat. It doesn't work like that. And that's what Rabbi Yosei is saying. So now the Gemara says, Itmar was stated, Rav Chia bar Yosef, and the Bach on the side corrected to say, that says Rav Chia bar Ashi. Okay, and that it should say Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav, that it adds a name. That it should say so it should say Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav Halacha ke Rabbi Yosei. The halacha follows Rabbi Yosei. Ushmuel Amar Halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda. Shmuel takes the lenient opinion. He says we follow Rabbi Yehuda. And we say that even though this is a matter of physical reality, these two walls collapsed on Shabbat, it doesn't matter. Since at the beginning of Shabbat it had four walls, we're fine with it for the rest of Shabbat. So the question is, Umi Amar Shmuel, Hachi, did Shmuel really say this lenient view? And now what the Gemara is going to do is construct a proof that Shmuel himself has said that when it comes to walls, we're not necessarily lenient. When it comes to Eruvin, symbolic Eruvin, we're lenient. But when it comes to walls, issues of actual mechitzot, we're not usually lenient. So why is Shmuel taking here the lenient view of Rabbi Yehuda instead of the stringent view of Rabbi Yosei? So the Gemara says, did Shmuel really say this? But we learned in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda says, we learned earlier in a Mishnah, earlier on in this Masekhet, that when it comes to Eruvei Techumin, you can't make an Eruvei Techumin without somebody's permission. What's the reason? Very simply. If I decide to make an Eruvei Techumin to the west, that means I gain 2,000 amot of travel to the west. So now instead of just being able to walk 2,000 amot to the west, I can walk 4,000 amot to the west. But that means now I can't walk even one footstep to the east out of my city. I can only go to the west when I make an Eruvei Techumin. So I can't decide for somebody else to do that, because maybe they want to go to the east. So I say, you know what, I'm going to make an Eruvei Techumin for everybody, we're going west. But wait, maybe Ari wanted to go east. It's not fair. He didn't agree. So it doesn't count. But Eruvei Chatzerot in a courtyard, what do you have to lose if they make an Eruvei Chatzerot? Do you lose anything? No, all you get to carry in the courtyard. You don't lose anything. So we can do that. Zachin ladam shelo bifanav means we can do something positive for you. We don't have to ask. If somebody comes to me and says, here's $1 million, I want you to accept this $1 million prize on behalf of Sammy, I don't have to say, wait, I need to ask his permission. I know it's to help him. So of course I can take it and it becomes yours. Legally, I receive it, it becomes yours. Okay? But if somebody says, take this shtar chov, Sammy owes me $1 million, I can't do that. Okay? So that without checking first. So that's why Rabbi Yehuda said that when it comes to Eruvei Techumin, we say you need someone's permission. Eruvei Chatzerot, you don't need permission. Va'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, and Rav Yehuda, remember Rabbi Yehuda is the Tana, he's the earlier generation from the Mishnah. Rav Yehuda is the Amorah from the later generation, said in the name of Shmuel, Halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda, that we follow Rabbi Yehuda, velo od, and not only is it the halacha following Rabbi Yehuda here, that you can make Eruvei Chatzerot without somebody's permission, Ela, kol makom sheshana Rabbi Yehuda be'eruvin, halacha kemoto. Every place that Rabbi Yehuda says anything about Eruvin, we follow him. Va'amar le Rav Chana Bagdeta'a le Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, and Rav Chana Bagdeta'a said back, according to this position of Rav Yehuda, in the name of Shmuel, afilu b'mavoi shenital korato lechayav. Are you telling me, even in a case of a mavoi that had a korah, remember you have a mavoi that has 3 sides, and then on the 4th side it either has a lechi, a vertical board, or it has a korah, a horizontal board going over the top. That was from the very beginning of the Masekhet, the first parak. So you have that allows people to carry in the mavoi, even if the korah gets taken away, or the lechi gets taken away. Even there, would Shmuel be lenient and follow Rabbi Yehuda's position that we permit people to carry in the mavoi the whole Shabbat? Is that true? He said, no. He said to him, Be'eruvin, amarti lecha, velo be'mechitzot. I'm talking about Eruvin, not mechitzot. Okay? Not walls. And the Korah and the Lechi have to do with enclosure. Okay? So what's a chidush here? What's the point here? That's the conclusion of the problem against Shmuel. Because Shmuel here is following Rabbi Yehuda and saying that if your house walls collapse on Shabbat, we say, whatever your house was at the beginning of Shabbat, that's the way it's going to be the whole Shabbat. And Shmuel said, yeah, we follow that view. So now the Gemara said, but wait a second, we already established that when does Shmuel follow Rabbi Yehuda? Only when it comes to Eruvin. But when it comes to walls, enclosures, he doesn't follow Rabbi Yehuda. So why is he following him here? It's considered like enclosure. It's an issue of enclosure, the Lechi. So Amar Rav Anan said, Ledidi mifarshali minei de Shmuel. Shmuel personally explained this to me. And he said, Kan shenifretza lekarmelit, kan shenifretza l'reshut harabim. There's a difference. When the enclosure is opened to a karmelit, in other words, when did Shmuel say that we follow Rabbi Yehuda if your house collapses? When what's around your house is a karmelit. It's only rabbinically prohibited to carry. So there, Shmuel says, you know what, we can be lenient. We'll say that the status that your house had, which now it's only going to be a Carmelit anyway, because that's what it's open to. So since we're only dealing with rabbinic laws anyway, we're going to say, we'll let you stay as a Reshut HaYachid. If it were open to a Reshut HaRabim, there, Shmuel would say, no. We're not going to be able to be lenient, because it's an issue of Reshut HaRabim. It's an issue of Deoraita. So, however, because you might carry, in other words, from your place to the Reshut HaRabim. So there we're going to say that, you know what, as soon as those walls fall down, you can't move. You can't do anything. You can't move anything. You can't go. But if it's open, so Rashi says there that so he says, if a person were to carry out of this house where the walls collapsed, there's no biblical prohibition involved. So, in other words, what Shmuel is saying is that when the issue of carrying is dirabanan, there we can be lenient. When the issue of carrying is deoraita, there we're going to be stringent. Now, of course, the question can be asked, a very obvious question, which is that saying that this house, let's say, is if the house around you if the area around you is a Reshut HaRabim, and you say that your house is also Reshut HaRabim, that actually could be a leniency, right? Right. So you know. So your leniency, you can still carry. Right, because it says that you can't carry that far, but you could carry 4 amot. Let's say you could carry things a little bit further. Let's say as long as you're within 4 amot, you could carry it from, let's say, within the house to outside. So you could view that as a biblical issue, but I think that what Shmuel is saying is that when the issues involved are deoraita. Okay, when the issues involved, in other words, these reshuyot, these boundaries that are involved are deoraita. So that's when we're going to say that a change can happen even on Shabbat. We look at the physical reality right now. In other words, Deoraita, we look at the physical reality right now. We say the house collapsed. Now you're dealing with opening to a Reshut HaRabim and you can't move anything. And apparently he would say, you can't anyway move anything from within your house to the Reshut HaRabim because it's going to be a Carmelit anyway. But the point is, we're not going to tell you that you can move around within your house because we're concerned that you might carry out of your house. Whereas if around your house is only an Isur de Rabbanan, because it's a Carmelit anyway, so by telling you that you can carry within your house for the rest of Shabbat, we're not concerned that now you're going to carry from a place that's really a Reshut HaYachid into a Reshut HaRabim.
And your Tachomim is not Derabanan?
All these things are only de Rabbanan.
Really?
Yeah. So there's one opinion of the Rambam that up to that there's a certain level of Eruv Beit Chumin, which is anything that you can use an Eruv Beit Chumin to fix is only derabanan. Let's put it that way. Yeah, that's for sure. So so Shmuel is going to say that when it comes to biblical rules, the status persists throughout Shabbat. I'm sorry, the other way around. The status will change if the physical reality changes on Shabbat. And when it comes to rabbinical issues, when the surrounding area is only a Carmelit, and now your house is going to be also a Carmelit, we say that we can consider it a Reshut HaYachid for the whole Shabbat, and even though the physical reality has changed. But anyway, according to Tosafot on the side, he says, generally we say Halacha Kerav B'isurei. Anyway, we go like Rav when it comes to issues of ritual laws, and that would mean that in this case we're going to follow Rabbi Yosei in all circumstances, meaning no matter what is surrounding your house. If the walls collapse on Shabbat, that is a game changer. Okay, we're going to look at the physical reality moment to moment. We're not going to look at what it was at the beginning of Shabbat. Now the new Mishnah says, "Haboneh aliyah al gabe shnei batim v'chen gisharim mefudashim metaltalin tachtehen b'Shabbat." Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Now what this is talking about is as follows: that you have two houses that are situated in the Reshut HaRabim. On top of these two houses, like a bridge across them, you built a third dwelling. So in other words, it's resting on these two houses. So underneath this upper house is space. If you're standing underneath the upper house, it's over you, and you have a house to your right and a house to your left. In front of you and behind you are open, because you built it over these two houses. So I think that there's an illustration here to give you an idea of what it means. It's not complicated. Maybe I'm not describing it as clearly as I could. So let me show you. Like this. So let's say it's something like, this is not really what we're talking about. This is not really the case, but this is not really the case. Because the case is so simple, they didn't make an illustration. But if you look at the illustration of 343, it will show you kind of what it means. In other words, there's two houses here, and imagine on top of this board you built a house.
Okay.
So under here is open, right? But that's not really the case. That illustration of 343 is not really the case. It didn't make an illustration because it's actually pretty simple. Or you have a bridge. What?
Is it like a carport? I forget what it's.
It's like a tripod. In other words, you have house, and on top of it you have a third house.
There's overlap.
So underneath that third house is just open space. It's like an alley between the two houses. It's like almost like the yard between the two houses is now covered by this third house.
Rabbi, when you see on the turnpike,
but isn't that like a roof that can come down?
Many times there's a bridge and build offices on that.
Yeah, it could be like that, yeah.
But isn't that like a roof that can come down, like we learned with the 4 posts and...
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it could be. But now, so in this case, you have two on both sides. It's wide open, and you have this house on top. Yeah. But the problem is that the difference is, okay, so what's the difference? It's a very good question. So why is that not pi tikra yored v'sotem? That's what you're asking.
Yes, yeah.
Why don't you just say, just like we say a roof comes down and closes, right? Why doesn't this work? So you tell me. Can you remember why? Because it's not a roof. In other words, a roof is made for what's under it. So that's why we say, forget about even that, because even Shmuel said with one wall is enough. But you only need two. You only need two because you have a house on the right, a house on the left. They're giving you 2 walls, and you have this on top. But the problem is, it's not a roof because it's not made for the underneath. A roof is defined as something that's made for what's under it. So we extend its edge down because it's made for what's under it. But I'm glad you raised that question because it's important. Okay, but this house is made for being on top. It just happens by accident. It creates something underneath.
What if the alley underneath is used? as shade.
It could be, but still, even so, the purpose of the building was to be on top. Yeah, it has to be the purpose. Yeah.
Wait, and another question: is the house on top? Is it overlap with the two houses underneath? So is there, for example,
it's totally closed.
No, there's an alley, but the house on top extends out to the houses, or it's on like a.
It sounds like it's just resting on them. I don't know how it is. It doesn't say how. It doesn't say how it's fixed there. It doesn't.
It goes all the way, right? To the two houses on the sides.
It has to overlap. Otherwise, how are they sitting on
support? Yeah.
So but that's really the chidush here. But I mean, according to Rabbi Yehuda, he is saying that pitikra yored v'sotem. But the question is, why does everybody else not say that? So that's not. So I'm explaining it according to everyone else. Okay, so everyone else would say it's the bottom of something. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that's his whole chidush here. That even though this top house is not made for what's underneath it, we can still extend down the walls and close up that area and say that you can carry under there. And similarly, if you have a gisharima mifulashim, that you have you have a some kind of a bridge, okay, and a road goes underneath it, like an overpass. Okay, you have like an overpass. So you also have the same thing that we can extend, even though it's open on two sides, it's closed on two sides, right? If you're underneath that overpass or whatever, so you have on one side wall, you have on top of you something, but you're open on two sides, right? You're open front and back. So still, he says, you can carry into there. But the rabbis say that's no good. Okay, and Rabbi Yehuda, and furthermore, Rabbi Yehuda said, "Ma'arvin mavoya mifolash v'chachamim osrin." Rabbi Yehuda said that if you have a mavoya mifolash means it's open on two sides. Normally, when we're talking about a mavoya, we're talking about she'eno mifolash means that it's closed on three sides. It's only open on one side to the Rishut Harabim.
It's like cul-de-sac.
No, because that's usually. But Rabbi Yehuda is saying even if it's open on two sides. In other words, you have it's a tunnel. It's like a tunnel. It's open on two sides. Still, you can put a lechi on one side, a lechi on the other side, and you only have two mechitzot actually, but you're good. According to Rabbi Yehuda, we'll see more. Now the Gemara says, don't assume that Rabbi Yehuda is lenient about the case of the tripod houses, okay, or the case of the bridge overpass. Don't say that he's lenient because there are two mechitzot and he holds that you only need two mechitzot to make a private domain. It's because even in this case, even though the purpose of the overhang or the upper house is not to be a roof, he still says, Pitikra yored v'sotem. He still allows you to use the fact that it functions as a roof, even though it's not meant as a roof, is enough to say that it closes off the area beneath. Abaye says, that's not true, because Yeter al Ken Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mishish Lo Shnei Batim Mishnei Tzidei Reshut Harabim Oseh Lechem Mikan V'Lechem Mikan Okora Mikan V'Kora Mikan V'Noseh V'Noten Be'emta. We've learned several times already in Masekhet Shabbat and even in Masekhet Eruvin that according to Rabbi Yehuda, if you have two houses, you have a house over here, a house over here, in between them is the 495, anything, a Reshut Harabim going through, house here. He says you can put a lechi on one side, a lechi on the other side. Or you can put a korah going across on one side and a korah going across on the other side. And in between the edges of the houses, you can carry in that area. Why? Because the wall of this house is one wall. The wall of this house is another wall. The fact that a Reshut Harabim goes in the middle, we don't care because you put a lechi here and a lechi here. Or you put a korah going across on one side and a korah going across on the other side. So you delineated an area. That's like a mavoya mifolash. It's the same thing. You have a mavoya mifolash means it's open on both ends, but you put a symbolic closure on one side, a symbolic closure on the other side. Yeah, on each end. So you see that actually he does hold mechitzot, two mechitzot, deoraita is enough. It's enough. And what did the Chachamim say to him? Amrulo in ma'arvin reshut harabim bakach. The rabbi said to him, you cannot enclose a reshut harabim with only two walls. That's not enough. So what do we see though? That Rabbi Yehuda does hold that only two walls is enough. Maybe that's why he holds if you have a house on the right and a house on the left and a house on top, that it's enough because you already have two walls. Maybe that's the reason. So it would seem like that would be a logical explanation. So Amar le mehahiin, you're right, that is what he says in that Braita. But mehaleka lemishmamina, but there's no way to derive that halacha from this Mishnah. In other words, you're right that in the Baraita, he says that you take a Reshut HaRabim with a house on the right and a house on the left, and you can make it into a Reshut HaYachid. That's true. But that's not the reason why in our Mishnah he's saying that if you stand under the house that's situated on top of two houses in a tripod formation, that you're in a Reshut HaYachid. That's not the reason. And what's the reason that we know that that's not his basis? Because Amar Rav Shimat Nitina Midika, because we can learn from our Mishnah. Because since it says in our Mishnah, furthermore, Rabbi Yehuda says that he says, not only do I say in the case of the tripod houses or the bridge overpass that you can carry underneath the overhang, but also Rabbi Yehuda said that when you have a mavoy that's open on both sides, you can make a lechi on one end and a lechi on the other end, and you're good. So now if you say, and this is Rashi's second and chosen interpretation, he gives two interpretations, we're taking the second one. If you say that Rabbi Yehuda's reason for the first two cases is different than his reason for the last case, okay? In other words, the reason for allowing you to carry under the tripod houses, right? And his reason for allowing you to carry under the bridge overpass. If you say that his reasoning is because pi tikra yored v'sotem, that even though the upper piece wasn't made as a roof, it can still function as a roof, then it makes sense, the Mishnah, because then the Mishnah gives you another situation. Amavoya mifulash. Mavoya mifulash has no roof. It just has walls on either side. So he's adding something. He's saying ve'od, something new. But if you're going to tell me, but if you're telling me that the reason for the overpass and the reason for the tripod houses is because you have two walls, and the reason why the mavoya mifulash is good is because it has two walls and just a lechi on either side, then it's the same case. It's exactly the same case. Anytime you have two walls and you're in between them, you're good. So therefore you see that there must be a different reason. The first half of the Mishnah, it then says ve'od, and furthermore, here's a new case where there is no roof. You just have two walls. So there must be a difference between the first two cases and the last case. Because the first two cases are good because the overhanging piece is considered to enclose the area. And not only that, even when you don't have an overhanging piece, as long as you have a lechi on one end and a lechi on the other end, and you have two mechitzot, you're good. So Shema Mina, we learn from this that there are two chidushim, there are two novel pieces, two novel aspects to Rabbi Yehuda's position here, and that thus we conclude Adron alach kol gagot, Adron alach kol gagot, Adron alach kol gagot. We complete the 9th and penultimate chapter of Masekhet Eruvin.
The two new things are two walls are enough,
right?
And
that the roof will enclose, even though it's not made for what's underneath it. Yeah.
Two questions. We didn't get to.
We're not up to that yet. That's study something. Yeah, we're not up to that yet, though.
What?
Oh, that what we did already. That was yesterday. Where in the ruin that it has four tefach board in a ruin you could carry under it. That was from yesterday. Yeah.
Okay. The question is, Eruvin needs for Rabbanan.
Yeah, most of it.
Most of it. The tzedek is for the oraita that we learn from the man to carry.
Right. Carrying from Reshut HaYachid to Reshut HaRabim for real, or Reshut HaRabim to Reshut HaYachid, or in a Reshut HaRabim, that's all the oraita. So whenever we're talking about Eruvin, we're always talking about places that are enclosed. So really, Mina Torah, it's Reshut HaYachid. So Rabbi Yehuda is lenient. He says that Mina Torah, even two walls, is Reshut HaYachid. If you're in between two walls in a tunnel, it's Reshut HaYachid. Mina Torah. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the Chachamim say no, at least 3 walls to make Reshut HaYachid. Mina Torah. So now the new Mishnah, Hamotzei Tefillin, the last parak, has a lot of interesting sidebars. There's still some things about carrying and so on, but there's some other ideas here that we're going to see. Hamotzei Tefillin, if a person finds Tefillin abandoned in a forest or something like that, Machnisan zug. So what does he do? You're walking along the road, you see somebody abandoned tefillin in the middle of the road. What do? You wear them, put them on even though it's Shabbat. You wear them one pair at a time. So you put on the first pair, you walk into the house, take them off, leave them there, go back out, put on the tefillin, come back in. Why are you allowed to do this? So Rashi says you find them in the field. Somebody left them there. What's the reason? Because of kavod. You don't want these tefillin to be babizui, babizayon. They're going to be ruined. They're going to be disrespected. So because of the kavod of tefillin in the name of Hashem, so you wear them inside. Rabban Gamliel omer shenayim shenayim. Rabban Gamliel says you can wear 2 tefillin at a time.
We saw people.
Yeah, those are Rabbeinu Tam with the Rashi, but here he's talking about even two of the same. Even 2 of the same, you can walk in with it.
But what about not wearing tefillin on Shabbat?
You're not allowed to. They're going to talk about that. So, Bamed Dvarim Amorim Bishanot. When is this talking? Yishanot, old tefillin. In other words, tefillin that have already been completed and used. Okay, aval b'chadashot patur. But if they are new, you're exempt. What does it mean exempt? It doesn't mean exempt. It means you're not allowed to wear them in. Now, the Gemara later, not in today's daf, but in the subsequent, I think not in today's daf, I don't even think it's in tomorrow's daf, I think it's probably on Wednesday, in Thursday's daf, is going to explain what does it mean chadashot, what does it mean new tefillin. But basically what it means is, Rashi explains here, dilma kamea hen ba'alma, because people used to make kameot, they used to make amulets, and these amulets looked like tefillin. And people would wear them. But they weren't tefillin. How could you tell? You could tell from the knots. Because in the kameot, they wouldn't make the shin knot and the and the dalid. They wouldn't make that. The yud and the dalid. They wouldn't make the knots in the leather. So you would see a strap and you would see the box, but you wouldn't see the knot of the tefillin. So if they're yishanot, if they are already established as tefillin, in other words, they've been used and you can see the knot there or the imprint of the knot, then you know that they're actually tefillin. But if it just looks like the box of the tefillin, with straps hanging there, but it doesn't look like it's been tied into actual tefillin, then you can't take it because it just might be a kamea. It might not be actually tefillin. We'll see more about that. Mitzan tzivatim okrichot. Let's say if you found them wrapped into pairs. In other words, there were many tefillin wrapped together in like sometimes when they
you buy them new one,
when you buy them, they're wrapped like that. But what if you see them wrapped with many pairs? In other words, if they wanted to sell them in bulk, they would wrap them all together with the straps together into a unit. So what do you do now? So that okurichot, or you find them, all tied up together. The Gemara later is going to describe what the difference is between these two cases. So machshich alehen, you should wait with them. In other words, sit there until nightfall to guard it. So that animals don't come and chew it or ruin it. Sit there and umivian, and at the end of Shabbat bring them, because that concept is that you can't wear these because they're all tied up, but you don't want to leave them abandoned to the elements. So uvasakana, we turn to Amud Bet, in a case of danger where you can't sit there. Okay, you're worried that you might be hurt. So mechasan ve'olechlo, you try to cover them with something and go, because you can't endanger your life to save the tefillin. Rabbi Shimon says, Rabbi Shimon says, I have a trick for you. You can't carry 4 amot in a Reshut HaRabim, right? That's an Isur Deoraita. That's Deoraita. You can't carry 4 amot in a Reshut HaRabim, 6 feet. So he says, I have an idea. Bring 10 friends. I pick up the tefillin, I hand it to you, you hand it to you, you hand it to you. Then I go around, we keep going, in the line. I hand it to you, then I go to the end of the line, and we make a line. Nobody ever moves it more than a few inches. We get it to the Chatzer HaChitzona, we get it to the nearest courtyard. Once we're in the nearest courtyard, it's safe. And then we're in a Reshut HaYachid.
If it's far, the we're talking about, 500 feet. So
it would take a while. In other words, you would have to pass it. In other words, pass it to one guy, and then he'll pass it to the next guy. Then you go around, you take it. So it never is carried by one person too far.
It would never ended.
Right. It would take a long time.
Really only 2 guys, right?
Well, probably at least 3. Probably at least 3. Yeah.
Why not 1? You cannot. 1, you pass it to your friend, then you go.
Yeah, but then that would be even more too complicated. I guess you could in theory. Yeah, maybe. And similarly, if you have a child, let's say that's born out in the field, they didn't make it home in time. So then what do you do? Now, then even 100 people you could get to be involved in transporting the baby to get the baby to the Reshut HaYachid. Rabbi Yehuda says, a person can hand the chavit, he can hand a barrel of wine to his friend, and his friend to his friend, even if he takes it out of the techum, even if it ends up going outside of the limits. We'll see more about this later in the Gemara. That the barrel should not travel further than than the leg of its owner. In other words, you cannot take it outside of the place that its owner is able to travel. We'll see more about that when we get in the Gemara. Yes?
Quick question. It seems like, back to the tefillin, the tefillin is valued past just a part of Hashem's name on it.
That's right, because the Kabeah also has Hashem's name on it.
Right.
That's right, so it's more value.
Old tefillin also has Hashem's name on it.
The Chachamim have like an interesting love-hate relationship with Kameot.
That's interesting.
You know, like when it comes to like a fire on Shabbat, they said, let them burn. Even though it has Hashem's name in it, they don't care. But Sifrei Torah, even if they're pasul, they would say, take it out.
Right.
Right?
But also, tefillin, that's not Hadash also. I mean, it would have Hashem's name on it.
Right, but what they mean by Chadash, the Gemara is going to explain, it means that it looks like it was prepared for tefillin, but it was never tied, so you can't tell that they're really tefillin.
But you could,
if they're brand new and you know they're tefillin because you just bought them, that would be different.
But the point is, I think you can't extrapolate this to like just a piece of parchment with just.
No, you would definitely not, because the Kameah is made like with Hashem's name written a lot. Then you can't. Only tefillin. So now the Gemara says Zug echad in tefillah. So it tells us in the Mishnah that you can only wear one pair of tefillin at a time. Lema tenan stama de la Rabbi Meir. This Mishnah seems to contradict Rabbi Meir. Why? Rabbi Meir ha'amar lovesh kol ma sheyochol lilbosh v'otif kol ma sheyochol la'atof. Because Rabbi Meir said that if you have, say, for example, God forbid, a fire on Shabbat, and you want to be able to take clothes out of the house. We learned in Masekhet Shabbat towards the end, in Perek Kol Kitvei, we learned that you cannot carry a lot of stuff out even into the courtyard because we're worried that you're going to become in a panic and you're going to extinguish the fire and violate Shabbat. So we allow you though to wear all that you can wear and to wrap yourself in all that you can and go out, and then you can go back in, wear as much as you can, bring it out, go back in. In other words, you can do that again and again. So if you can actually wear 2 pairs of tefillin, the question is going to be, so why doesn't the Mishnah allow you to wear 2 pairs of tefillin? So this seems to contradict Rabbi Meir, because and it's not as we learned in the Mishnah, and it says Ulsham motzi kol kaleta shmisho v'lovesh kol ma sheyochol lilbosh v'otev kol ma sheyochol la'atof. And that Mishnah says that you can wear all that you need. In other words, you put on all the ornaments you can, you wear everything that you can, and you wear it out into the courtyard. And how do we know that it's Rabbi Meir in that Mishnah? Maybe it's not Rabbi Meir. Because we learned about it. Lovesh umotzi poshet. Wear it, take it out, and take it off. And then vilovesh umotzi poshet. You keep doing it again and again. Afilu kol hayom kulo. All day long you can do this. As the fire is burning, divrei Rabbi Meir. That's what Rabbi Meir said. So in other words, we see there's a Mishnah that tells us that you can wear all that you're capable of wearing, and you can walk out with it into the courtyard to save it in a fire, let's say. So why would our Mishnah say that if you find, let's say, 3 pairs of tefillin out in the forest, that you can't put them on and wear them all 3 together or 2 of them together into the city? That it contradicts what Rabbi Meir says. Rabbi Meir says you can wear all that you can wear, all that fits. So the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, Afilu Tema Rabbi Meir. Really, Rabbi Meir would agree that you can only wear 1 pair of tefillin. But Hatam derech malbusho kachol shavyo Rabbanan. Because over there, the rabbi said, wear things like you do on the weekday. On the weekday, sometimes you bundle up with a lot of clothing. You wear more than what you need. Sometimes you wear a t-shirt, and a shirt, a jacket, a sweater, whatever. You wear a lot of things. And here too, the rabbi said, do it the way that you do during the weekday. In a normal situation, as much as you want to wear, you're allowed to wear. And that's what the rabbi said with a fire. You're allowed to wear as much as you want. But when it comes to tefillin, just like with tefillin, you only wear 1 pair at a time. So too, when it comes to saving tefillin, you only wear 1 pair at a time. So in other words, Rabbi Meir is consistent. He will tell you that my rule is do things, in other words, wear things the way you would wear them during the week. And just like during the week, you only wear 1 pair of tefillin at a time, you only wear 1 pair of tefillin at a time. Well, during the week, you might wear all that you desire. You can wear as many pieces of clothing and as many ornaments as you want, and sometimes you wear a lot, and sometimes you wear less. So here, when you're saving it from a fire on Shabbat, you're allowed to wear as much as you want, just like you would during the week. But nobody wears more than 1 pair of tefillin during the week. Now this is interesting because, of course, according to the Mekubalim, who say that even in the times of the Talmud, they were wearing Rabbeinu Tam and Rashi at the same time. Some of the Mekubalim say that they always did, and so this seems to contradict that, unless Rabbi Meir didn't hold by that, because I know, but there's some Mikubalim who say, oh, even in that time, they wore both, but it seems pretty clear that they didn't. Rabban Gamliel Omer Shanaim Shanaim. Rabban Gamliel says, you can wear 2 pair at a time. Now, this is not because he holds like Rabbeinu Tam. This is because he's telling you that that's how many you can wear at a time. Mai kasavar. So the question is like this. What does Rabban Gamliel maintain? I kasavar Shabbat zman tefillinu. If he holds that Shabbat is zman tefillin, and we're going to learn that there is a Tana, an opinion of Tanaim that holds that you can wear tefillin on Shabbat. We'll see. So if he holds that that Shabbat is the time of tefillin, zug echad in tefillah, then you should only be able to wear 1 pair of tefillin at a time, because otherwise it's bal tosif, you're adding on to the mitzvah. How can you wear 2? Ve'i kasavar Shabbat lav zeman tefillinu umishum atzala derech malbush sharu leRabanan afilu tefeinami. And if he holds that really Shabbat is not the time for tefillin, and therefore, what is the reason why you're allowed to put on tefillin? It's because it's derech malbush. It's because you're wearing the tefillin like you would wear clothes, like you would wear an ornament. So if that's the case, so then if that's the case, then you should be able to wear as many as you want. Wear 3 pairs of tefillin. In other words, the number 2 is arbitrary. 1, you could say, okay, that's the way you wear it during the week when there's a mitzvah. If you hold that zman tefillin, that Shabbat is zman tefillin, that's fine. If you hold that it's not zman tefillin, still it's the way you wear it during the week. But if you're going to tell me that Shabbat is, that you can wear, only 2. Why 2? It's arbitrary. You don't wear 2 during the week, and if there's a mitzvah on Shabbat, you don't wear 2. And if you're just wearing it because you're wearing it, so why can't you wear 3 if it's an ornament? Why 2? So what's the reasoning behind that? So the Gemara says that the answer is. Oh wait, where were we? Okay, so so he says. So the Olam Kasavar Shabbat loves Zman Tefillin. So really, he holds that Shabbat is not the time for Tefillin. But when did the rabbis say that you could carry these Tefillin or wear them into the courtyard? When did they allow you? Only bimkom Tefillin. Only when you're wearing them in the place that Tefillin are normally worn. Only when you're wearing them in the location on your body that tefillin are normally worn. But if that's the case, why do we allow more than 1? Because Amar Rav Shmuel Bar Rav Yitzchak, right? Makom yesh barosh laniach moshe tefillin. Because there's a famous saying: there's enough space on your head to fit 2 pairs of tefillin.
Really?
Yeah, there's enough space. That's where they get that idea of putting the Rabbeinu Tam and the Rashi at the same time. There's enough space. So wait a second. That makes sense for the head tefillin. It says makom yesh barosh on your head, but what about the arm? Kider Ravuna, it must be like Ravuna. The Amar Ravuna, Ravuna says, "Pamim shadam pamina sadeva chavilato al rosho umisalekan merosho vekoshran bizro." Because Ravuna said that sometimes a person will be coming in from the field and he'll have a package that he's carrying on his head. So we'll take the tefillin off of his head and he'll tie it onto his arm. So you see that you can put 2 tefillin on your arm.
1 arm?
On 1 arm.
Still the same arm.
Same arm. So Emar da Amar Ravuna shelo yinhag ben derech bizayon ra'oi mi amar. But wait a second, Rav Huna is just telling you a practical thing. He's saying that it's okay to avoid disrespecting the tefillin by putting a package on top of them. You're allowed to strap it onto your arm for a minute. But that doesn't mean that really qualifies as a place that you can wear tefillin. He's just saying it's a good place to strap it while you're doing work.
It's the wrong type of tefillin to put on your arm.
Right, that's true. It's the wrong type of tefillin to put there. So rather, what do we say? Ela keda amar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak makom yesh barosh shero'ei laniach bo shetei tefillin achanami makom yesh bayad shero'ei laniach bo shetei tefillin. Rather, just like Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak said that you can fit 2 sets of tefillin on your head, so too he would say that you can fit 2 sets of tefillin on your arm. That there's enough space on your bicep for 2 tefillin, there's enough space on your head for 2 tefillin. So since Rabban Gamliel is saying that we're doing this, there is no mitzvah of tefillin on Shabbat, but we're saying derech malbush, you're doing it the way of wearing it, and there's enough space to say that this is a legitimate space to wear it, is this whole area on the forehead and this whole area on the arm is legitimate space to wear it. That's why he allows you to wear it in 2 pairs of tefillin at a time. So hold on 1 second. So Tanadver Menashe, the Yeshiva of Menashe said, Al yadecha, it says you should tie the tefillin on your arm. Zo kiboret, this is talking about the bicep. Ben einecha, between your eyes. Zo kod, this is the forehead. Hecha amrei, so sehecha. So where on the forehead? Devei Rabbi Yanai says, so amrei devei Rabbi Yanai. So makom shemocho shel tinok rofes. According to Rashi, I think the girsa is rofef, but it doesn't matter. It means the same thing. In other words, the area of the head of the tinok, of the baby, that's soft, right? The soft spot, that is where you could put the tefillin. So it's anywhere between the hairline, basically, and that's the soft spot of the baby's head. That's where the tefillin can go, and there's enough space there to fit 2 tefillin. Did you want to say something?
Yeah.
Before we go to the next part?
It's derech malbush. Why does it matter if you put it tefillin in the right spot?
Because that's derech malbush. In other words, derech malbush means the normal way of wearing it, so it has to be within the range of where you would normally put that. So you can't put, let's say, a scarf. You wouldn't normally be tied on your knee. Well, actually, maybe it would. I guess if that was cool for a while, bandanas on the knee, right? But they're different. It has to be what's normal. It has to be what's normal.
Isn't it not giving kavod to tefillin if you're wearing a derech malbush?
Derech malbush, well, you're saving it, so you have to look at the purpose of the action. Yeah. So lema b'derav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak kamipalge. So now the question is going to become, well, what do we do with this machloket between the Tanna Kama and Rabban Gamliel? We're assuming, agreeing that there's no mitzvah of tefillin on Shabbat. Everybody's assuming that you're bringing it in derech malbush. You're bringing it in, wearing it on purpose. So why does the Tanna Kama allow you, or Rabbi Meir allow you only to wear 1 set, while Rabban Gamliel is allowing you 2 sets? Don't they both agree on the principle that 2 tefillin can fit on your body? So lema, maybe we should say, b'derav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak kamipalge. The Tanna Kama le-derav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, Rabban Gamliel it le-derav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. Maybe we should say that exactly is the machloket. That according to the Tanna Kama, you can only fit 1 pair of tefillin on your head and arm, and according to Rabban Gamliel, there's space for 2. In other words, they're arguing about that very question, about whether there's enough space to fit 2 pairs of tefillin on your arm and your head. Maybe that's the issue. So, no, that's not an issue of dispute. Everybody agrees there's enough space on your arm to fit 2 pairs of tefillin, and there's enough space on your head to fit 2 tefillin. What they're really arguing about here is whether Shabbat is zman tefillin. Whether it's legitimate to wear tefillin on Shabbat. It's really? Okay, so if the Tanna Kama is Shabbat zman tefillin, because the Tanna Kama is saying that Shabbat is zman tefillin, meaning to say that when you're wearing this tefillin in, you're wearing it as the mitzvah. You're wearing it as the mitzvah. So how many do you wear? 1. However, Rabban Gamliel savar Shabbat la zman tefillin. But Rabban Gamliel says that Shabbat is not zman tefillin. So therefore, since he says it's not zman tefillin, what does that mean? Since you're only wearing it as an ornament, you might as well wear 2. Right? If you're wearing it and it's a mitzvah, you can only wear 1. But if we're saying there's no mitzvah, so therefore Rabban Gamliel says we're 2.
Why can't you wear 1 as mitzvah, 1 as derech malbush?
That's Bal Tosif. Now you have an issue of Bal Tosif. In other words, once you have a mitzvah, so now you're already adding onto the mitzvah if you wear 2.
But isn't it? Right? So aren't you adding onto the mitzvah if you wear it on Shabbat if it's not required on Shabbat?
No, because if it's not required on Shabbat, we're saying, in other words, we're saying that you're just wearing it for the month. Okay, that's going to come next. Actually, that possibility is going to come next. So hold on to that idea. So alternatively, maybe everybody agrees that Shabbat is zman tefillin. It's legitimate to wear tefillin on Shabbat according to everybody. So, but what they're arguing about is whether mitzvot require kavanah. The Tanna Kama savar, the first Tanna Rabbi Meir says, Latzet ba'ei kavanah. To fulfill the mitzvah requires kavanah. So therefore, when you put on the tefillin, Rashi explains here that what is that? What's the significance? Therefore, sha'osem mitzvah tzarich shechaven ba ilkach zug echad in tefilo de'im mechaven the mitzvah ikabal tosif bechad ve'ilo mechaven the mitzvah tarvayu masoininu ven kan mitzvah. In other words, the Tanna Kama is saying there's a mitzvah of tefillin. Okay, you have to have kavanah to qualify it as a mitzvah. So you can't wear 2, because if you wear 2 and you have kavanah for both, that's Bal Tosif. And if you wear 2 and you only have kavanah for 1 and not the other one, then it's just you're carrying it. You're not really right. You're just carrying it, so it's no good. Rabban Gamliel, what is he going to say? Rabban Gamliel holds that lo ba'e kavanah, that there's no kavanah necessary for a mitzvah. Therefore, what does Rashi explains? Ilkach mitzvah ika bal tosif leka de'en over al bal tosif ela im ken nitkaven la mitzvah veze lo nitkaven uvchol chad amrich hay la mitzvah. So this is the first interpretation of Rashi. So he says that according to this interpretation, it goes like this: that the Tanna Kama says that since you need kavanah for a mitzvah, that means you can only have one. And Rabban Gamliel says you don't need kavanah for mitzvot, therefore you can have two. Why can you have two? Because Rashi says because since you don't need kavanah, either one could be the mitzvah. You don't have to be committal. You can be non-committal. And it's not bal tosif because you're not having kavanah to add one. You're just not saying anything. You're not saying anything. So, but now you're going to say, what are you talking about?
Yeah,
so wait. So Rashi already said that for you. Velibi, I'm reading from the Rashi, the last of the thin lines of Rashi. Velibi megamgem lomar. Rashi says, my heart's bothering me. Okay, why? Dekevan de lav tachshit ninhu. So once you're saying it's not a tachshit anymore, it's not an ornament anymore, it's a devar mitzvah. It's done for a mitzvah. So nei debal tosif leka isur, right? So he says debal tosif leka. I understand why it's not bal tosif. Okay, in other words, because you're not having intent to add a mitzvah, but still isur Shabbat miyalo paka. But still, only one of them can be doing the mitzvah.
Exactly.
So the other one's got to be is a burden. You're carrying it, right? So fine, you're not violating the prohibition of Bal Tosif, but how can you not say that the second tefillin is additional in terms of Shabbat? And you can't say that everybody agrees it's an ornament. Because if that's the case, that everybody agrees that tefillin is an ornament, why does the Tanna Kama not allow you to wear two? Okay, and you could say, okay, the first one's for the mitzvah, the second one's an ornament. So obviously he's holding it's not an ornament. Right. It's a burden.
Right.
So therefore what does Rashi say? So he says, Lo lechaven velo litzar, because according to the Tanna Kama, you could just say, don't have intention to add the mitzvah, and it'll just be a tachshit. Veleka lememar nehi nami del Tanna Kama lo avu tachshit, velarban gamliel avu tachshit. And you also can't say that the Tanna Kama holds that tefillin is only a devar mitzvah and it's not an ornament, and that's why he allows you only to have one. Rabban Gamliel says it's both. It's a devar mitzvah and an ornament, so you can have two. You can't say that. Why? Because the imken loke plugtayo bachi. Because that's not what it says. The Gemara doesn't say that. It says that it's about Bal Tosif. It's about Kavanah. It has nothing to do with Tachshit. Ve'od hainu plugta del el dizman ve'lavzman. And that's exactly what the possibility was before. Because we were saying, if it's Zman Tefillin, if Shabbat is Zman Tefillin, then it's a mitzvah. If it's not Zman Tefillin, then it's a Tachshit. That's what we're saying. So you're just saying the same thing twice. Rather, what Vinir Ali, Tahachi Garsinan. Rather, this is what Rashi will tell you. That Rashi is interpreting, says the Gemara really should read differently. How so? The Tanna Kama savar mitzvot en tzrichot kavana. Okay, ulachule alma tachshiten. That our Girsan, the Gemara is reversed. That it's the Tanna Kama that says that it's really that mitzvot do not require kavanah, and everybody agrees it's a tachshit. Hilkach kevan de le'inyan mekpak yedei chovate nafik belo kavanah le'inyan bal tosif nami afal gav de lo mechaven lo lemitzvah ika bal tosif kevan de zman tefillin hu. That the Tanna Kama says, the first Tana says, since to do the mitzvah you don't need kavanah, then also to add on to the mitzvah you don't need kavanah. So that means that the Tanna Kama is going to say you can only wear one pair of tefillin. Because if you wear two, just like wearing one automatically credits you with the mitzvah, even though you didn't have special kavanah. Adding on to the mitzvah is also a problem, even if you didn't have special kavanah. And therefore you can only wear one at a time. Okay, Rabban Gamliel savar tzrichot kavana latzet yedei chovato hilkach beval tosif nami lo avar ad mechaven the mitzvah. And Rabban Gamliel will say that, in other words, everybody agrees it could be a tachshit, it could be an ornament. Everybody agrees. The only thing is that since we're holding that now Shabbat is Zman Tefillin, now the question becomes, according to the Tanna Kama, automatically by putting it on you're fulfilling the mitzvah. That means if you wear two pairs of tefillin, automatically you're doing double and it's no good. The Rabban Gamliel says you don't automatically fulfill the mitzvah. Therefore, wearing two is okay because we'll just say you're wearing it as an ornament. and you're not fulfilling the mitzvah at all. You're wearing 2 pairs of tefillin, and it's lo ma'aleh v'lo morid. It doesn't help you and it doesn't hurt you. It's just an ornament. But if you were to say that mitzvot don't require kavanah, automatically you're doing the mitzvah, then wearing 2 would mean automatically you're doing 2. And that's no good. So if we reverse the logic behind the 2 positions, in other words, and we say that the Tanna Kama, who says that you're only allowed to wear 1 pair, is the one that says mitzvot don't require kavanah. And we say the Rabban Gamliel, the one that says you wear 2 pairs, is the one that says mitzvot require kavanah. So then it makes more sense. Then it works out okay. So then we turn to Tzadivav Amud Aleph Ve'iba et Ema. An alternative interpretation is Dukole Alma Latzet Lo Ba'i Kavanah. That everybody agrees that you fulfill the mitzvah automatically without any kavanah. And still we can have a machloket. And the machloket here is whether in order to add onto the mitzvah you need kavanah. That according to the Tanna Kama, you putting on 1 pair automatically you fulfill the mitzvah according to everybody. So therefore it's no problem to wear 1 pair. The question is the second pair. According to the Chamim, according to Rabbi Meir, when you put on the second pair, automatically you're doing Bal Tosif. According to Rabban Gamliel, when you put on the second pair, you just say, I just intend for this to be an ornament. I don't intend to add. So the first one I put on, automatically it's for the mitzvah. The second one, it's just an ornament. Right. Okay? That's actually what you do when you put on Rabbeinu Tam, isn't it? When you put on Rabbeinu Tam, you're supposed to say that tonight. If I fulfilled the mitzvah with the first one, this is just a tachshit. There's just an ornament, because otherwise you're adding on a mitzvah. That's the way you're supposed to do it. V'bayit ema. Alternatively, a 4th interpretation of the machloket between Rabban Gamliel and the Chachamim is that we could say Eid Sfiralan de Shabbat Zman Tefillin de Kulei Alma Lo La'avor Ba'ei Kavana Velo Latzet Ba'ei Kavana. That if we say that Shabbat is a time of Tefillin, then that means that everybody agrees that to violate Bal Tosif requires kavanah, and lo la'avor by kavanah, v'lo latzet by kavanah, that nothing requires kavanah. In other words, if Shabbat is zman tefillin, then automatically, if you wear 1 pair of tefillin, you fulfill the mitzvah. If you wear 2 pairs of tefillin, you're adding automatically. It doesn't require kavanah. However, here, what are we dealing with? The issue here is la'avor shelo bizmano. When it's not the time for a mitzvah and you do it, do you have to have kavanah to add in order for it to be a violation? In other words, you could argue like this. When it's time for tefillin and I say I'm going to put on 6 pairs of tefillin, that's a violation. But when it's not even time for tefillin, I'm not even doing the mitzvah, so how could I be adding onto it? It's like if I eat matzah today. Did I add on to the mitzvah? Of course. No, I'm not allowed to eat matzah. There's no mitzvah. But if, let's say a person were to, well, that's actually not the best example because matzah is not really, it's only a lo ta'aseh at the end. But let's say lulav etrog. If I shake a lulav and etrog and I decide, you know what, I really like parsimons, I like parsimon. I would put a parsimon with my etrog and add something. So if it's during Sukkot, it's Bal Tosif for sure. You're adding something. What if after Sukkot I say, you know what? I want to add on. I love this lulav. I want to do it again. Is that Bal Tosif? Is it? It's Motzei Yom Tov. Yeah. So that's the issue. So wait. So what do we say? So if I just decide to carry around the lulav and etrog with me, I don't say it's a mitzvah. I just like it. I like flowers. I like plants. It's pretty. Am I allowed to do that? Yeah, you could do that. So how do we know? Because otherwise, we'll see. We'll see. So the question here is lavor shelo bizmano. So can be pagay. The Tanna Kama savar lo ba'i kavana, v'Rabban Gamliel savar lavor shelo bizmano ba'i kavana. So that's the issue. In other words, since Shabbat now we're saying is lav zman tefillin hu. So the question is, when I put on tefillin, am I adding on to the mitzvah? Am I adding on to the mitzvah? So according to Rabbi Meir, in other words, the Tanna Kama will say that it's shelo bizmano. Okay, it's shelo bizmano. So that means if I wear 2 tefillin, I'm adding onto the mitzvah automatically. He says even shelo bizmano, automatically you're adding onto the mitzvah. So if I do double tefillin, it's one thing if I wear tefillin on Shabbat, that itself wouldn't be considered an addition, apparently. But if I wear 2 pairs of tefillin, now I'm adding. It would be like if I carry around the lulav and etrog with me on Simchat Torah, that wouldn't be that's not necessarily a problem. But if I add a persimmon to my lulav and etrog, now and I'm adding on purpose. So he says, it doesn't require kavanah. Automatically, I'm adding onto the mitzvah. I'm adding onto the mitzvah, even though it's shelo bizmano. It's not the time for the mitzvah anymore. So no, anytime, and even shelo bizmano.
Why
okay.
would it be because it's not a time?
Well, we'll see. One second. That's going to come up. So Rabban Gamliel says it doesn't require that it requires kavanah. So that means that if I wear 2 tefillin, but I don't intend to add onto the mitzvah, because in other words, if it were the zman tefillin, that would be adding. But since it's not the time for tefillin, I'm not even really doing the mitzvah. So how could I be adding to the mitzvah? That's what Rabban Gamliel is saying. The Tanakama is saying, true, it's not the time for the mitzvah, but once you're doing it, you can be adding to it. That's what they're saying. So now, they say, Ihachi, if this is true, they're going to reject this opinion anyway. Ihachi le Rabbi Meir, zugehad nami lo. So wait a second, that's your question, okay? So then according to Rabbi Meir, how can you even wear the tefillin? Why isn't adding Shabbat onto the days that you wear tefillin also adding? Right? That's the obvious question that you guys are alluding to here. Ve'od, and furthermore, hayashen b'shmini b'sukkah yilakeh. A person who sits in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeret should get malkut for adding on to the mitzvah. Why? In other words, even outside of Israel, we should be in trouble. How can the rabbis require us to go into the sukkah on Shmini Atzeret? It's an Isur Deoraita, we're adding on. The answer is that shelo bizmano, it's not the time of the mitzvah, and we don't intend to add on to the mitzvah. We're just doing it as a custom. We don't intend to add on to it. So we don't get malkut for that. So what do we learn? 2 principles here. Number 1, adding a day onto the mitzvah. In other words, wearing tefillin on the day that there is no tefillin is not bal tosif. Right? Sitting in the sukkah on a time that is not for sukkah is not bal tosif if you don't have the kavanah to add. So therefore, putting on tefillin on Shabbat is not going to be a problem if you don't have kavanah to add onto the mitzvah. If you did, it would be a problem. Okay, but if you're not, then it wouldn't be. So ela machvarta, rather kedeshaninan meikara. One of the earlier interpretations of the machloket must be the correct one. This one is not correct. We do not go with the view that it's an issue about adding onto the mitzvah when it's not the time for the mitzvah. So that last interpretation, that really what we're talking about is that Shabbat is not the time for tefillin. And the question is, if by wearing it you automatically are adding onto the mitzvah, that is not a valid view. Because if that were the view, then we wouldn't even be allowed to wear one according to Rabbi Meir. Right? And we wouldn't be allowed to go into the Sukkah Shmini Atzeret. There would be all kinds of problems that we would automatically be considered adding onto the mitzvah in these circumstances. So we go like one of the earlier interpretations, one of the other, 3 or 4 interpretations of the Machloket. How many were there? There were, I think, 3 prior interpretations of the Machloket that were considered valid.